A gunshot echoed through the dusty main street of Angels Camp, California, making Thea Robinson flinch as she disembarked from the stagecoach that had carried her across the rugged terrain of the Sierra Nevada foothills. It was 1874, and the once booming gold rush town had settled into a quieter existence. Though still wild enough to make a 22-year-old schoolteacher from Boston question her decision to accept a teaching position in such a remote location. "Welcome to Angels Camp, miss," the stagecoach driver said, handing down her trunk. "Watch yourself. Town's lively today." Thea straightened her travel-worn blue dress and adjusted her small hat, surveying the wooden storefronts and saloons that lined the main street. Men gathered outside the Golden Nugget Saloon snickered as she collected her belongings. One of them, a red-faced man with a dirty beard, spat tobacco juice that narrowly missed her boots. "Look here, boys," he called out loudly. "Another proper Eastern lady come to civilize us savages." Laughter erupted from the group, and Thea felt her cheeks burn as she picked up her carpetbag. She had been warned about the rough nature of Western mining towns, but experiencing it firsthand made her stomach clench with anxiety. Still, she lifted her chin and began walking toward the schoolhouse where she was to meet the town council chairman. The men's laughter grew louder as she passed, struggling with her heavy trunk. She refused to look their way, focusing instead on maintaining her dignity despite the dust soiling the hem of her dress and the sweat beading on her forehead under the California sun. "They laughed when she walked alone," came a deep voice from behind her. A tall figure stepped beside her, his shadow falling across her path. "Not anymore." A man in a worn leather vest and faded blue shirt offered his arm. His face was partially obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. He was clean-shaven, unlike many of the rough-looking miners, and though trail dust covered his clothes, there was something undeniably dignified about his posture. "Owen Xavier," he introduced himself, tipping his hat with his free hand. "Town marshal. Let me help you with that trunk, madam." Thea hesitated, her Boston upbringing making her wary of accepting help from strange men, but the continued stares from the saloon patrons convinced her to accept his offer. "Thank you, Marshal Xavier. I'm Thea Robinson, the new schoolteacher." "Figured as much," he replied, lifting her trunk with ease. "Been expecting you. Mrs. Holloway's been filling in since old Mrs. Peters passed, but she's got 5 children of her own to mind." His voice carried a slight drawl, but his words were precise and well-formed. As they walked together down the dusty street, the laughter from the saloon died down. Thea noticed how people nodded respectfully to the marshal, stepping aside to let them pass. "Is it always this lively?" she asked, gesturing toward the saloon where the men had now turned their attention to a card game. "Payday at the mines," Owen explained. "Once a month, the men come in with their earnings. Some spend it wisely, others." He shrugged. "Well, you'll get used to the rhythm of things. Angels Camp isn't as wild as some places, but we have our moments." They approached a white-clapboard building set apart from the main street, with a small bell tower on top. The schoolhouse was modest but well-maintained, with flower boxes beneath the windows containing wild California poppies that added splashes of gold against the white paint. "Here we are," Owen said, setting down her trunk on the schoolhouse porch. "Your quarters are through that side door. Council arranged for you to have the rooms adjacent to the classroom." Thea stood on the porch, taking in her new workplace. After the long journey and uncomfortable welcome, seeing the schoolhouse gave her a sense of purpose. This was why she had come west, after all, to make a difference in a place that needed education. "Thank you, Marshal. I appreciate your kindness." "Owen," he corrected with a slight smile. "Everyone calls me Owen around here, except when they're in trouble." Their eyes met, and Thea felt a strange flutter in her chest. She looked away quickly, embarrassed by her reaction to this man she'd just met. "Will you be at the town meeting tonight?" Owen asked, stepping back down to the dirt path. Town council likes to welcome new teachers properly, not like those fools at the saloon. "I'll be there," she promised. "Once I've had a chance to freshen up." Owen nodded, replacing his hat. "I'll come by at 7 to escort you. Angel's Camp might seem rough at first glance, Miss Robinson, but there's good people here. You'll see." As he walked away, Thea realized she was watching him longer than propriety allowed. She turned quickly to unlock the schoolhouse door, but not before noticing the marshal glance back in her direction. Inside the schoolhouse, Thea found a simple classroom with rows of wooden desks facing a larger teacher's desk and blackboard. Sunlight streamed through clean windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. A door at the back led to her private quarters, 2 small rooms that would serve as her bedroom and sitting room, with a tiny kitchen space. Someone had left wildflowers in a jar on the small dining table, along with a note welcoming her to Angel's Camp. After unpacking her essentials and washing away the dust of travel, Thea sat on her narrow bed, wondering if she'd made a mistake coming to this remote mining town. In Boston, she'd had suitors and comfortable society, but also the suffocating expectations of her family. Here, she would be her own woman if she could withstand the stares, the whispers, and the loneliness. She thought of the marshal's steady gaze and found herself wondering what had brought a man like Owen Xavier to Angel's Camp. He didn't have the rough edges of a miner or the slick manner of a gambler. There was something solid about him, like the mountains that surrounded the town. At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock sounded on her door. Owen stood there in a clean shirt and vest, his badge polished, his manner formal yet somehow warm. "Ready, Miss Robinson?" he asked, offering his arm once more. "Please call me Thea," she said, taking his arm. "If I'm to call you Owen." His smile reached his eyes this time. "Thea it is, then." The town hall was already filled with people when they arrived. Thea noticed immediately that the atmosphere was different from her arrival earlier that day. Families had come, women in their best dresses chatting in small groups, children running between tables laid with food. Owen guided her through the crowd, introducing her to the prominent citizens of Angel's Camp. There was Mayor Harrison and his wife, the widow Holloway who had been teaching in her absence, Dr. Phelps and his young family, and shopkeepers, ranchers, and miners' wives. "Everyone," Mayor Harrison called out eventually, tapping a glass for attention. "I'd like to officially welcome Miss Thea Robinson to Angel's Camp. She's come all the way from Boston to educate our children, and we're mighty fortunate to have a teacher with her qualifications." Polite applause filled the room, and Thea felt her nervousness ease as smiling faces turned toward her. "Miss Robinson, would you like to say a few words?" the mayor asked. Thea hadn't prepared a speech, but she stepped forward anyway. "Thank you all for the warm welcome. I'm looking forward to getting to know your children and becoming part of this community. In Boston, we have fine schools with many resources, but what makes a good education isn't fancy books or buildings, it's the desire to learn and grow. I can already see that desire here in Angel's Camp." Her words were met with enthusiastic applause, and several mothers came forward to introduce their children who would be her students. Thea found herself relaxing as the evening progressed, enjoying conversations and learning about her new home. Throughout the evening, she was aware of Owen's presence, even when he was across the room speaking with the mayor or other town officials. Occasionally, their eyes would meet, and she would feel that same flutter in her chest. As the gathering began to disperse, Owen appeared at her side. "May I walk you back to the schoolhouse?" The night air was cool after the warmth of the town hall, and stars blazed overhead with a brilliance Thea had never seen in Boston. They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Owen spoke. "I hope today's welcome makes up for your arrival," he said, Those men at the saloon don't represent the heart of this town. I understand, Thea replied. Every place has its rough edges. Boston certainly does, though perhaps not quite so visible. Owen chuckled. I've never been east of the Mississippi myself. Born in Texas, raised on the move. My father was a cavalry officer. Is that why you became a lawman? She asked, curious about his past. Partly, he admitted. Saw too many towns torn apart by lawlessness. Figured I could do some good wearing a badge. He paused, then added, What brings a Boston lady to a place like this? Thea considered her answer carefully. Independence, I suppose. In Boston, my path was predetermined: teach at a ladies' academy until I married suitably, then maintain a proper household. Here I can make a real difference. She hesitated, then added, and perhaps find out who I truly am, away from my family's expectations. Owen nodded, seeming to understand what she didn't fully express. Freedom's worth the dust and hardship, then? I believe so, she said softly. Though ask me again after my first winter here. They reached the schoolhouse, and Thea turned to face Owen. In the moonlight, his features seemed both stronger and gentler. Thank you for your kindness today, she said. You've made this strange place feel less foreign. My pleasure, Thea, he replied, the sound of her name in his voice sending an unexpected warmth through her. School starts Monday. I'll stop by tomorrow to make sure you have everything you need. After he left, Thea stood on her porch for a long moment, watching his figure disappear into the night. The stars overhead seemed to wink knowingly, as if they held secrets about what her future in Angel's Camp might hold. Monday morning arrived with the ringing of the school bell, summoning 28 children of various ages to the classroom. Thea stood at the door, greeting each student by name as they entered, having memorized the school roster provided by Mayor Harrison. Teaching children ranging from 6 to 16 years presented challenges, but Thea found herself energized by their eagerness to learn. Even the older boys, some already working part-time in the mines, showed respect for her position, if not immediate enthusiasm for their studies. After dismissing the students that afternoon, Thea was erasing the blackboard when she heard the schoolhouse door open. She turned to find Owen leaning against the doorframe. How was your first day school, marm? He asked, a hint of teasing in his voice. Exhausting but rewarding, she admitted, brushing chalk dust from her hands. The Holloway twins are quite spirited, and young Jimmy Phelps asks more questions than I can possibly answer in a day. Owen laughed. That's Jimmy for you. Boy's been taking apart clocks since he was 5, just to see how they work. He stepped into the classroom, looking around at the geography maps Thea had hung and the books she'd arranged on shelves. Place looks different already. I brought some books from Boston, Thea explained, and Mayor Harrison promised the town would order more supplies soon. Owen nodded, then seemed to hesitate before speaking again. Some of us are having a picnic by the creek this Sunday after church. Thought you might like to join us. Get to know folks outside of official town functions. Thea felt a pleasant surprise at the invitation. I'd like that very much. Good, Owen said, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. I'll come by around noon, if that suits you. After he left, Thea found herself humming as she finished cleaning the classroom. Life in Angel's Camp was beginning to feel less like an impulsive adventure and more like a place she could belong. The week passed quickly, filled with lessons, getting to know her students, and occasional encounters with Owen. Sometimes he would walk her home after school. Other times she would see him patrolling the streets as she ran errands in town. Each interaction, however brief, left her looking forward to the next. By Sunday, Thea had settled into enough of a routine to feel comfortable with her place in Angel's Camp. Church service introduced her to even more townspeople, and afterward, true to his word, Owen arrived at the schoolhouse to escort her to the picnic. He had a horse with him, a sturdy bay gelding that nuzzled Owen's pocket looking for treats. "This is Samson," Owen introduced. "Thought we'd ride out to the creek together, if you don't mind sharing a saddle. It's a fair walk otherwise." Thea hesitated only briefly. In Boston, riding alone with a man would have caused a scandal, but Western customs were different. Besides, they would be joining others for the picnic. "I'd be happy to ride with you," she said, adjusting the small basket of biscuits she'd baked for the occasion. Owen mounted first, then reached down to help her up behind him. Thea settled awkwardly, unsure where to place her hands. "You'll want to hold on," Owen advised with amusement in his voice. "Samson's gentle, but the trail's a bit rough." Tentatively, Thea placed her hands at Owen's waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt. As they rode through town and onto a trail that followed Angel's Creek, she gradually relaxed, enjoying the rhythm of the horse beneath them and the scenic beauty around them. The picnic spot was a grassy clearing beside the creek, where several families had already gathered. Children splashed in the shallow water while adults spread blankets and unpacked food. Thea recognized Dr. Phelps and his wife, the widow Holloway, and several parents of her students. Owen helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Let me introduce you to a few people you might not have met yet," he said, guiding her toward a group sitting beneath an oak tree. The afternoon passed pleasantly, with good food and better company. Thea found herself drawn into conversations about books with the doctor's wife, who had been educated in San Francisco, and discussions about the town's history with elderly Mr. Finch, who had been one of the original settlers during the gold rush. Later, while the children organized a game of tag and the adults broke into smaller groups, Owen suggested they walk along the creek. They found a quiet spot downstream, where the water pooled deeply enough to reflect the blue sky and surrounding trees. "You're settling in well," Owen observed as they sat on a fallen log. "The children already adore you. They're wonderful students," Thea said warmly. "Even Tobias Miller, though he pretends to be too grown up for school. Tobias has had a hard time since his father died in the mine collapse last year," Owen explained. "His mother's doing her best, but the boys had to grow up fast." Thea nodded thoughtfully. "I noticed he helps his younger sister with her lessons. He has a good heart beneath that tough exterior." They fell into comfortable silence, watching the water flow over smooth stones. Thea found herself studying Owen's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight crease between his eyebrows as he gazed at the distance. "What made you become a teacher?" he asked suddenly. Thea smiled at the question. "I've always loved learning. My father has an extensive library, and I practically lived among his books as a child. When I grew older, I realized not everyone had that privilege, especially girls. Teaching seemed the natural way to share knowledge." "Your family supported this adventure west?" Owen asked, a note of skepticism in his voice. Thea laughed softly. "Hardly. My mother was horrified. My father was more understanding, but concerned. They expected me to teach at a proper ladies' academy in Boston, marry a suitable gentleman, and live no more than a few streets away from them. And instead, you came to a mining town a continent away. I saw the advertisement for a teacher in a newspaper. Frontier town seeks educated individual to instruct youth of all ages. It called to something in me I didn't know was there." She looked at him curiously. "What about you? Have you always been in Angel's Camp?" Owen shook his head. "Been marshal here 3 years now. Before that, I rode with the Texas Rangers for a spell, then worked as a deputy in various towns across the territories." "What made you stay here?" Thea asked. Owen was quiet for a moment, his gaze still on the creek. "Tired of moving, I suppose. Angel's Camp has good people worth protecting, and the most beautiful countryside I've seen." He looked at her then, his eyes reflecting the deep blue of the sky. Now there's even more reason to stay. The warmth in his gaze made Thea's heart quicken, and she looked away, suddenly aware of how alone they were, despite the picnic just around the bend. "We should probably return to the others," she said, rising from the log. Owen stood as well, but before they could start back, he touched her arm gently. "Thea," he said, his voice low, "I'm glad you answered that advertisement." The simple statement carried weight beyond its words, and Thea felt a surge of emotion she wasn't prepared for. "So am I," she managed to reply before they walked back to join the picnic, both aware that something had shifted between them. As summer progressed into autumn, Thea found her days falling into a pleasant routine. Mornings and afternoons were filled with teaching, while evenings often included visits from Owen or social gatherings with townspeople who had quickly accepted her as one of their own. One crisp October afternoon, as leaves turned gold in the Sierra foothills, Owen appeared at the schoolhouse just as Thea was dismissing her students. "Marshal Xavier," young Jimmy Phelps exclaimed. "Did you bring your gun? Can I see it?" "Jimmy," Thea admonished, "the marshal's weapons aren't toys." Owen smiled at the boy. "Your teacher's right, Jimmy. But if your parents agree, maybe someday I can show you how to respect and handle firearms properly." He turned to Thea as the last students filed out. "I was hoping you might join me for a ride this afternoon. There's something I'd like to show you." Curiosity piqued, Thea agreed, and soon they were riding double on Samson again, this time heading into the hills east of town. After several months in Angel's Camp, Thea had grown comfortable with the casual Western way of life, no longer concerned about the propriety of riding with Owen. Indeed, their friendship had deepened to the point where hardly a day passed without them seeing each other. They rode for nearly an hour, climbing steadily through pine forests until they emerged onto a ridge overlooking the entire valley. Angel's Camp lay below them, smoke rising from chimneys, the church steeple visible even at this distance. Beyond it, the landscape stretched toward the horizon, painted in autumn colors. "It's breathtaking," Thea exclaimed, dismounting with Owen's help. "I had no idea such a view existed." "Found it my first month here," Owen said, leading her to a flat boulder where they could sit comfortably. "Come here sometimes to think, or just to remind myself what I'm protecting." They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western mountains. The air was cool at this elevation, and when Thea shivered slightly, Owen removed his jacket and placed it around her shoulders. "Thank you," she said, drawing the warm garment closer. It smelled of leather, pine, and something distinctly Owen. "For bringing me here, and for everything since I arrived." Owen turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Thea, there's something I've been meaning to tell you." Her heart quickened at his tone. Over the past months, their friendship had grown increasingly important to her, and she found herself thinking of Owen at odd moments throughout her days. Yet neither had spoken of deeper feelings, maintaining a careful boundary between friendship and something more. "Before I came to Angel's Camp," Owen began, "I was tracking a gang that had robbed banks across 3 territories. Their leader, a man named Marcus Blackwell, killed 2 lawmen in Arizona territory." Thea listened, surprised by this turn in conversation but sensing its importance to him. "I finally caught up with them in Nevada," Owen continued. "There was a shootout. I took a bullet in the shoulder, but I got Blackwell. The rest of the gang scattered." He unbuttoned the top of his shirt enough to reveal a puckered scar on his left shoulder. "What I didn't know then was that Blackwell had a younger brother, Thomas, who wasn't part of the gang but swore vengeance anyway." "Is that why you came here?" Thea asked. "To hide." Owen shook his head firmly. "No, I came because I was offered the marshal position and wanted to settle somewhere peaceful. But last week, I received word from a ranger friend that Thomas Blackwell has been asking questions about me in mining towns throughout California. Understanding dawned on Thea. You think he might come here? It's possible, Owen admitted. I've alerted the mayor and deputy, but I wanted you to know directly. He took her hand in his grip warm and steady. Thea, in these months since you've arrived, you've become important to me, more than I expected or planned for. Thea's breath caught at his words, her pulse racing. You've become important to me too, Owen. His blue eyes searched her face. If Blackwell comes to Angel's camp, things could get dangerous. I wouldn't blame you if you decided to return east. Is that what you want? She asked quietly. No, he answered without hesitation. What I want is to court you properly, without the shadow of the past hanging over us. But I needed you to know the truth first. Thea squeezed his hand. I'm not running away, Owen. Not from Angel's camp, and certainly not from you. The relief in his expression was palpable. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, Owen leaned closer. Their first kiss was gentle, a question being asked and answered in the meeting of their lips. When they parted, the sun was casting long shadows across the valley, painting the world in gold and amber. We should head back before dark, Owen said reluctantly. As they rode down the mountain, Thea's arms wrapped securely around Owen's waist. She felt both exhilarated and peaceful. Whatever dangers might come, they would face them together. November brought colder weather to Angel's camp, with frost rimming the schoolhouse windows each morning. Thea had begun official courtship with Owen, joining him for dinners at the hotel restaurant and Sunday walks after church. The townspeople observed their growing relationship with approval and, in some cases, knowing smiles that suggested they had predicted this outcome from the beginning. On a Tuesday afternoon, as Thea was helping her youngest students practice their letters, a commotion outside drew her attention. Looking through the window, she saw 3 riders trotting slowly down the main street, their manner suggesting they were studying the town carefully. A knock at the classroom door revealed Mrs. Holloway, her expression concerned. Miss Robinson, Marshal Xavier asked me to fetch you. He wants you to stay at my house until further notice. What's happening? Thea asked, though she had a sinking feeling she already knew. Strangers in town, Mrs. Holloway answered, lowering her voice so the children wouldn't hear. Marshal thinks they might be trouble. My husband's coming to watch the children for the rest of the day. Reluctantly, Thea gathered her personal items and allowed Mrs. Holloway to escort her to the Holloway home, a comfortable 2-story house near the church. Through the windows, she could see Owen standing outside the marshal's office, watching the newcomers as they tied their horses outside the saloon. He'll be fine, Mrs. Holloway assured her, noting her worried gaze. Owen Xavier's the most capable lawman this town has ever had. Hours passed with agonizing slowness. Mrs. Holloway tried to distract Thea with preparations for dinner and conversation about the upcoming Thanksgiving celebrations, but Thea found it difficult to focus on anything but the potential danger outside. Just after sunset, a knock at the door made both women start. Mr. Holloway, who had returned with the children, answered it to find Owen standing there, his expression weary but relieved. It's safe now, he told Thea as she rushed to the door. They weren't Blackwell's men after all, just prospectors passing through. They've moved on already. The relief Thea felt was overwhelming. She impulsively threw her arms around Owen, not caring about propriety or the Holloway's presence. Owen returned the embrace briefly before stepping back, a small smile on his face. May I walk you home? He asked. Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars brilliant against the dark sky. They walked in silence for a few minutes, both processing the day's tension and relief. I was afraid for you, Thea admitted finally. Owen took her hand, his touch reassuring. Part of wearing the badge. Most days are peaceful, but you never know when trouble might ride into town. Is this what it will always be like? She asked. Fearing strangers. Wondering if they've come for you? Owen stopped walking, turning to face her. Thea, I can't promise a life without risk, but I can promise that everything I do, including wearing this badge, is to protect what matters this town, its people, and especially you. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. In the moonlight, Thea could see it was a simple gold ring with a small ruby set in the center. I had planned something more romantic, Owen said, a touch of nervousness in his voice that Thea had never heard before. But today reminded me that life doesn't always follow our plans. Thea Robinson, I love you. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears sprang to Thea's eyes, emotions overwhelming her. The months in Angel's camp had transformed her in ways she hadn't anticipated. She had come west seeking independence and purpose, never expecting to find love as well. Yes, she whispered, then more firmly, yes, Owen, I love you too. The ring slid onto her finger perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Owen's kiss was deeper than their first, filled with promise and certainty. As they continued toward the schoolhouse, now officially engaged, Thea felt a profound contentment. Angel's camp had become home in every sense of the word. The town embraced news of their engagement with enthusiasm. Women immediately began planning a wedding celebration, while the men clapped Owen on the back with knowing grins. Mayor Harrison offered the town hall for the ceremony, suggesting a date just before Christmas when the whole town could attend. Thea wrote to her parents in Boston, explaining her decision and hoping for their understanding, if not their blessing. She described Owen's character and position, emphasizing the respect he commanded in Angel's camp and her own happiness. November progressed into December, bringing colder weather and occasional snow flurries that excited the schoolchildren. Thea incorporated holiday traditions into her teaching, having students create decorations for the schoolhouse and practice carols for a Christmas performance. One afternoon, as the children were rehearsing Silent Night, the schoolhouse door opened to admit a blast of cold air and a tall, distinguished man in an expensive coat. "Father!" Thea exclaimed, recognizing him immediately despite the unexpectedness of his appearance. Thomas Robinson surveyed the classroom with a critical eye before focusing on his daughter. "I received your letter," he said simply. Thea quickly dismissed her students for the day, promising they would continue rehearsal tomorrow. As the last child departed, she turned to face her father, a mixture of emotions: joy at seeing him, apprehension about his purpose, and a newfound confidence in her own decisions rising within her. "You've come a long way," she said, offering him a seat at her desk. "Indeed," he replied, removing his gloves. "Your mother wanted to come as well, but the journey was too arduous for her constitution. She sends her love, however reluctantly." Thea smiled at the mention of her mother's dramatized delicacy. "I'm surprised you came at all." Thomas Robinson sighed, the stern lines of his face softening slightly. "You are my only daughter, Thea. Did you truly believe I would miss your wedding, however unexpected your choice of husband and location may be?" "You don't approve," Thea stated, recognizing the reservation in his tone. "I haven't met the man," her father pointed out reasonably. "However, I will say that Angel's Camp appears to be exactly the sort of frontier settlement I feared: dusty, primitive, and far from civilization's refinements." Before Thea could defend her new home, the door opened again, and Owen entered, concern evident in his expression. "Thea, Jimmy Phelps told me a stranger was—" He stopped, noticing her father. "My apologies for interrupting." Thea moved to Owen's side, taking his arm. Owen, this is my father, Thomas Robinson. Father, this is Marshal Owen Xavier, my fiancé. The two men assessed each other silently before Owen extended his hand. Mr. Robinson, it's an honor to meet you, sir. Your daughter speaks of you with great respect. Thomas Robinson shook Owen's hand firmly. Marshal Xavier, I understand you intend to marry my daughter. With your blessing, I hope, Owen replied steadily. Though I intend to marry her regardless, as she's agreed to become my wife. A hint of a smile touched Thomas Robinson's lips at Owen's forthright answer. Direct, aren't you, Marshal? I appreciate that quality in a man. Perhaps we should discuss this further over dinner. I'm staying at the hotel. That evening, the three dined in the hotel's small restaurant, the best establishment Angel's Camp had to offer. Though hardly comparable to Boston's fine dining, the food was well prepared, and the service attentive. Throughout dinner, Thomas questioned Owen about his background, his position as marshal, and his plans for the future. Owen answered honestly, neither embellishing his accomplishments nor hiding his modest financial situation. And where will you live after the wedding? Thomas asked. Surely not in the schoolhouse quarters. I've purchased land at the edge of town, Owen explained. Been building a house there for the past month with help from friends. It'll be ready by the wedding, 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen and living room. Nothing grand, but solid and comfortable. Thea's eyes widened. You've been building a house? Is that where you've been disappearing to on Saturdays? Owen smiled at her surprise. Wanted it to be a wedding gift. Dr. Phelps, Mr. Holloway, and several others have been helping with the construction. I'd like to see this house, Thomas declared. And perhaps meet these friends of yours as well. The next day, Owen took Thea and her father to see the house. It stood on a gentle rise overlooking Angel's Camp, with mountains visible in the distance. Though still unfinished, the structure was indeed solid, built of local pine with a stone foundation and chimney. The second bedroom can serve as a nursery eventually, Owen explained, a slight flush coloring his cheeks as he glanced at Thea. And there's room to expand as needed. Thomas walked through the rooms, inspecting the craftsmanship with an expert eye. Despite his initial reservations about Angel's Camp, he seemed impressed by the quality of the construction. You've built this well, he admitted to Owen. It will stand for generations. Over the next days, Thomas Robinson was introduced to the people of Angel's Camp, the mayor, the doctor, the shopkeepers, and many of Thea's students and their parents. He observed her teaching and saw the respect she had earned in the community. On his final evening before returning to Boston, Thomas requested a private conversation with Owen. They walked through town as snow began to fall gently, crystallizing on their hats and coats. I came here intending to persuade my daughter to return home, Thomas admitted. I believed she had made an impulsive decision that she would later regret. Owen remained silent, allowing the older man to continue. However, I see now that she has found something here that she never had in Boston, not just your love, Marshal Xavier, but a purpose and a community that values her for herself, not merely as Thomas Robinson's daughter. He stopped walking, facing Owen directly. I give you my blessing with one condition. Sir, Owen prompted when Thomas paused. Make her happy, Thomas said simply. That is all her mother and I have ever wanted for her, though we may have shown it poorly at times. I intend to, sir, Owen promised. For all the days of my life. Thomas nodded, satisfied. Then I will return for the wedding with her mother, assuming the weather permits travel. The day before Christmas Eve, Thea stood in the back of the decorated town hall, her heart pounding with excitement and nerves. Her mother and father had arrived 3 days earlier, bringing with them a trunk containing Thea's grandmother's wedding gown, hastily altered by her mother and Mrs. Holloway to fit Thea perfectly. The town hall had been transformed with pine boughs, red ribbons, and candles that filled the space with a warm glow. Every resident of Angels Camp had come, dressed in their finest clothes, to witness the marriage of their schoolteacher and marshal. "Ready, my dear?" Thomas asked, offering his arm to his daughter. Thea nodded, unable to speak past the emotion in her throat. As the music began played by Mrs. Phelps on the church piano, which had been temporarily moved to the town hall, she took her father's arm and began the walk toward her future husband. Owen stood tall at the front, his badge polished on his best vest, his eyes never leaving Thea as she approached. Beside him stood Dr. Phelps as his best man, while little Sarah Holloway preceded Thea down the aisle, scattering pine needles and dried flower petals. Judge Wilson, who traveled the circuit but happened to be in Angels Camp for the holidays, conducted the ceremony with dignified warmth. Thea and Owen exchanged simple vows and rings, hers the ruby engagement ring, his a plain gold band purchased with her savings. "By the authority vested in me by the state of California," Judge Wilson pronounced finally, "I now declare you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride, Marshal." Owen's kiss was gentle but firm, a promise sealed before the entire community. As they turned to face their friends and family, applause erupted throughout the hall, followed by cheers from the schoolchildren. The celebration continued well into the night, with music, dancing, and enough food to feed the town twice over. Thea's mother, initially stiff and reserved, gradually warmed to the genuine welcome extended by the townspeople. By evening's end, she was deep in conversation with Mrs. Phelps about plans to send books and educational materials from Boston to the Angels Camp School. As midnight approached, Owen and Thea slipped away from the celebration to the waiting buggy that would take them to their new home. Snow had begun falling again, adding a magical quality to the night as they drove through the quiet streets and up the hill to the house Owen had built. Inside, a fire already blazed in the hearth, casting golden light across the simple but comfortable furnishings. Owen carried Thea across the threshold, setting her down gently in what was now their home. "Welcome home, Mrs. Xavier," he said softly. Thea reached up to touch his face, wonder filling her at the journey that had brought her to this moment. "I love you, Owen." Their kiss deepened, all the emotion of the day channeling into this private moment of connection. As snow fell outside and firelight danced across the walls, Thea knew with absolute certainty that her decision to come west had been the right one. Spring brought new life to Angels Camp and to the Xavier household. The house on the hill bloomed with wildflowers that Thea had planted around the porch, and inside, Thea's body changed with the new life growing within her. Owen had been overjoyed at the news, his usual reserve dissolving into pure excitement. He'd immediately begun making cradles and small furniture for the nursery, while Thea continued teaching, determined to finish the school year before the baby's arrival in late summer. One warm May afternoon, as Thea was writing tomorrow's lessons on the blackboard after the children had gone home, a commotion in the street caught her attention. Looking through the window, she saw 3 riders entering town, their manner reminiscent of the false alarm months ago. But something about the lead rider's purposeful scan of the buildings sent a chill through her. He was younger than his companions, with dark hair and a face set in grim determination. Thea hurriedly gathered her things, intending to find Owen, but as she stepped onto the schoolhouse porch, the lead rider spotted her. Their eyes met briefly before he turned his horse toward the marshal's office farther down the street. Heart racing, Thea hurried toward the general store, the closest building with people who could help. Inside, she found Mr. Peterson, the proprietor, and 2 miners selecting supplies. "Mr. Peterson," she said urgently, "have you seen Owen?" "Believe he's over at the livery stable, Mrs. Xavier," Peterson replied. "Something wrong?" Before Thea could answer, the store's door swung open, and the young rider entered, his hand resting casually near his holstered pistol. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice deceptively pleasant. "I'm looking for Marshal Xavier. Might you know where I could find him?" Thea's protective instinct flared, but she maintained a calm exterior. "I'm afraid I don't know, sir. Perhaps you could check the marshal's office." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Already did. Deputy said he's out." He studied Thea's face. "You know, you look familiar somehow." "I'm the schoolteacher," Thea replied evenly. "I meet many people in town." "No, that's not it." His gaze dropped to her hand, where her wedding ring gleamed. "Xavier, you're the marshal's wife, aren't you?" Mr. Peterson stepped forward. "Sir, if you need to find the marshal for official business, his deputy can help you. Otherwise, I'd appreciate if you'd make your purchases or move along. Mrs. Xavier is in a delicate condition." The man's eyes flicked to Thea's rounded belly, visible beneath her dress, and something dark crossed his face. "Well, isn't that interesting? Thomas Blackwell, madam, at your service. Your husband killed my brother Marcus." The miners in the store tensed at the name, hands moving toward their belts. Peterson's face hardened as he reached beneath the counter, likely for the shotgun Thea knew he kept there. "Mr. Blackwell," Thea said, keeping her voice steady despite her fear, "whatever grievance you have with my husband should be addressed legally, not through violence." Blackwell laughed bitterly. "Legal? My brother got a bullet, not a trial. Your brother killed 2 lawmen and was shooting at my husband," Thea countered, surprising herself with her boldness. "Owen was doing his duty." Blackwell's hand twitched near his gun. "And I'm doing mine as the last Blackwell. Family obligation, you understand." The store's door opened again, and Owen stood framed in the entrance, his expression hard as stone when he saw Blackwell near Thea. "Looking for me, Blackwell?" he asked quietly. "Let's take this outside, away from my wife and these good people." "Owen, no," Thea protested. Blackwell smirked. "Listen to your wife, Xavier. I'd hate for her to watch you die." "No one needs to die today," Owen said, his hand conspicuously away from his gun. "You've ridden a long way for revenge, but killing me won't bring your brother back. It'll just put you in a hangman's noose." "Worth it," Blackwell spat. "And what about your companions outside?" Owen continued. "Are they willing to die or hang for your vendetta? Because my deputy and several townsmen have them covered right now." Uncertainty flickered across Blackwell's face. He glanced toward the window, where indeed several armed men were visible in the street, including Deputy Collins. "You're lying," Blackwell said, but with less conviction. "Am I?" Owen challenged. "This is my town, Blackwell. These are my people. Did you really think you could ride in here and threaten my family without consequences?" The standoff stretched for several tense seconds before Blackwell's shoulders slumped slightly. "What are you proposing, Marshal? Because I didn't ride all this way to leave empty-handed." "Justice, not vengeance," Owen replied. "You haven't broken any laws in my jurisdiction yet. Ride out now, peacefully, and you can continue your life without blood on your hands." Blackwell's eyes darted to Thea, then back to Owen. "And if I don't? Then only one of us walks out of here," Owen said simply. "And my wife is already expecting 1 child. She doesn't need to be a widow raising an orphan too." The blunt statement hit home. Blackwell's gaze lingered on Thea's pregnant form, something unreadable crossing his features. Finally, he nodded once, sharply. "My brother always said Xavier was the most annoyingly honorable lawman he'd ever encountered," Blackwell said with a bitter laugh. "I see what he meant now." He backed toward the door. "I'll go, but not because I'm afraid. Because unlike you, I don't make women into widows." "A wise decision," Owen said, stepping aside to let Blackwell pass. Once the door closed behind him, Thea rushed to Owen's arms, her composure finally breaking. He held her close, his heartbeat strong against her cheek. "Is it over?" she whispered. "I believe so," Owen replied, watching through the window as Blackwell and his companions rode slowly out of town, escorted by Deputy Collins and several armed townsmen to ensure their departure. "He's young but not stupid. He knows when he's outmatched." That evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple, Thea rested her head on Owen's shoulder. "I was so afraid today," she admitted. "Not just for you, but for our baby." Owen placed his hand gently on her rounded belly, feeling the occasional flutter of movement beneath. "I would never let anything happen to either of you. You're my whole world." "Thea, how did you know to come to the store?" she asked. "Jimmy Phelps," Owen explained with a smile. "The boy saw the riders come in, recognized Blackwell from the wanted posters I'd shown around, and ran straight to find me at the livery. That boy will make a fine deputy someday, if he doesn't become a doctor like his father." Thea laughed softly, imagining curious Jimmy as either a lawman or physician. "This town raises remarkable children." "Speaking of which," Owen said, his hand still on her belly, "have you thought more about names for our little one?" "If it's a boy, I was thinking William after your father," Thea suggested. "And if it's a girl, perhaps Eleanor after my grandmother." "William Xavier or Eleanor Xavier," Owen tested the names aloud. "Strong names for a child who'll grow up in a strong community." As darkness fell and stars appeared above Angel's camp, Thea felt a profound sense of peace. The danger had passed, and before them stretched a future full of promise. In late August, as summer heat gave way to hints of autumn, Eleanor Rose Xavier entered the world in the house on the hill, delivered by Dr. Phelps with the assistance of Mrs. Holloway and Thea's mother, who had traveled from Boston for the birth. Owen, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom door throughout Thea's labor, was overcome with emotion when Dr. Phelps finally invited him in to meet his daughter. The tiny girl had a crown of dark hair and, when she briefly opened them, eyes that promised to be as blue as her father's. "She's perfect?" Owen whispered, sitting carefully beside Thea on the bed and cradling his daughter with hands that seemed suddenly too large and rough for such a delicate creature. "She is," Thea agreed tiredly, her face glowing despite the exhaustion of childbirth. "Eleanor, meet your father, the bravest man in Angel's camp." Life settled into a new rhythm after Eleanor's birth. Thea took a temporary leave from teaching while Mrs. Holloway filled in, allowing her to focus on motherhood. Owen adjusted his schedule to be home more, delegating additional responsibilities to Deputy Collins, who had proven himself capable and trustworthy. By Eleanor's first birthday, their life had expanded to include frequent visits from Thea's parents, who had overcome their initial reservations about Angel's camp and now delighted in their role as grandparents. The town itself continued to grow, with new families arriving as mining operations expanded and additional services were established. One autumn evening, as they sat on their porch watching 2-year-old Eleanor toddle after butterflies in the yard, Owen turned to Thea with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Coming west, leaving Boston's comforts for this rough and tumble life?" Thea considered the question seriously. "Not for a moment," she answered truthfully. "In Boston, I was Thomas Robinson's daughter, defined by my family and society's expectations. Here, I became myself a teacher respected for my work, your wife, Eleanor's mother, and a woman with my own place in the community." She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers. "What about you? Do you ever think of going back to ranging or taking a position in a larger town?" Owen shook his head, watching as Eleanor triumphantly captured a fallen leaf and brought it to show them. "I found everything I ever wanted right here: purpose, home, family." He squeezed her hand. "Besides, Angel's Camp needs its teacher and marshal. As the sun set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across their land, Eleanor climbed onto the porch and into her father's lap, her small hands patting his chest where his badge usually rested. "Story, Papa," she demanded with the confidence of a child deeply loved. "Which one, little star?" Owen asked, though he already knew the answer. It was always the same request. "The laughing men and Mama walking," Eleanor said, settling comfortably against him. Owen smiled at Thea over their daughter's head. "Well, it happened like this," he began, his voice taking on the storyteller's rhythm that Eleanor loved. "They laughed when she walked alone, those rough men who didn't know any better. But I saw the bravest, most beautiful woman I'd ever laid eyes on, and I couldn't let her face them by herself. So I offered my arm and said, 'Not anymore.' And then you fell in love," Eleanor added sleepily, familiar with how the story ended. "Yes," Thea confirmed, her heart full as she looked at her husband and daughter silhouetted against the twilight sky. "And then we fell in love, and created the most wonderful life imaginable." As stars began to appear in the darkening sky above Angel's Camp, Thea Xavier reflected on the journey that had brought her west. From a Boston schoolteacher seeking independence to a frontier wife and mother, her path had not been what she expected. It had been infinitely better. Eleanor dozed in Owen's arms, secure in her parents' love and the knowledge even at her young age that she belonged to a special place and family. And as Owen's eyes met Thea's across their sleeping daughter, the connection between them was as strong and certain as the mountains that cradled their town. They had built a life together in Angel's Camp, a life of purpose and love that neither could have imagined that first day when laughter had turned to respect, and a simple offer of assistance had become the foundation of a shared future. As the years passed, the Xavier family grew with the addition of a son, Thomas William, born 3 years after Eleanor. The house on the hill expanded as well, with Owen adding rooms as their family's needs changed. Thea eventually returned to teaching full-time, while also establishing Angel's Camp's first proper library, with books donated by her parents and other benefactors back east. Owen continued as marshal until the children were grown, maintaining peace in a town that gradually transformed from a rough mining settlement to a respectable community with a school, church, library, and even a small theater. When he finally retired his badge, it was to take a position on the town council, where his experience and wisdom proved as valuable as his former authority. Eleanor grew into a confident young woman who combined her mother's intelligence with her father's steady courage. She eventually attended a women's college in San Francisco, a compromise between her desire for education and her parents' wish to keep her relatively close to home. Upon returning to Angel's Camp, she took over as the town schoolteacher when Thea retired, continuing her mother's legacy of education. Thomas, called Tom by everyone except his grandmother in Boston, inherited his father's height and his mother's love of books. He surprised everyone by studying law and returning to Angel's Camp to serve as the town's first permanent attorney and eventually its judge. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the entire town gathered to celebrate Owen and Thea Xavier, whose arrival and union had helped transform Angel's Camp. In a speech that brought tears to many eyes, Mayor Thomas Xavier, their son, recounted the story that had become legend in their family and community. "My parents' love story began with laughter not theirs, but that of men who underestimated a woman's strength. It continued when a marshal offered his arm and his protection, saying simply, 'Not anymore.' Those 2 words changed not only their lives but the course of our entire town." He raised his glass to his parents, who sat hand in hand at the head table, their hair now silver but their eyes still bright with the love that had sustained them through decades together. To Owen and Thea Xavier, whose courage, commitment, and love have shown all of us what it means to build a life of purpose and joy, may we all be fortunate enough to find what they found in each other. As applause filled the town hall, the same building where they had exchanged vows 3 decades earlier, Owen leaned close to whisper in Thea's ear. Would you do it all again? Come west to a dusty town where strangers laughed at a proper Boston lady. Thea turned to face the man who had been her partner through joy and hardship, through the raising of children and the building of a community, through quiet evenings on their porch and adventures across the changing West. In a heartbeat, she replied, meaning it as deeply as she had meant her wedding vows. Every step, every moment, every choice that led me to you and the life we've built together. As they joined the dancing that followed, moving with the ease of partners who had grown together through the years, Thea thought of that first day in Angel's camp. How frightened she had been beneath her brave exterior, how uncertain of her place in this rough Western world. And then Owen had appeared, offering his arm and his heart, changing her journey forever with those simple words, not anymore, not alone anymore, not afraid anymore, not uncertain anymore. Instead, beloved, respected, home. In Angel's Camp, California, where gold had once been the most precious commodity, Owen and Thea Xavier had discovered something far more valuable, a love that had not only endured but flourished, enriching not just their own lives but the lives of an entire community. A love that had begun with laughter and an offered arm, and continued into a legacy that would outlast them both.